So previously I've made videos of making sea glass, and then I also made a video about making what I call sea pottery. These were some of the pieces I made. These are all from Fiesta ware plates that I owned that I broke accidentally. So I'm like, well, let me turn the pieces into sea pottery. So it did in fact work fairly well. As you can see, like on this one, the glaze is still on, but the sides have been softened. However, on some pieces, far more of the glaze disappeared on the edges. Like on this side, it really started wearing it down. So you can only see, the glaze is only left in the parts that were originally like sunken in, whereas the higher points, the glaze has been lost. And on this side, you can still see the yellow glaze, but on the opposite side, it's basically almost all gone. So, I mean, I'm still fairly pleased with this, but I've got other sort of china pieces like this one. I have the foggiest idea where I got this. I'm fairly sure I never owned it. However, maybe one of my relatives did. I don't know. But anyway, it is broken. I don't know where it's from. I don't know if I bought this at a thrift store or what. But anyway, so I was thinking this would be neat to turn into sea pottery. But the issue with this one is that, you know, this is glazed, right? This is also glazed, but the real pretty part of it, these flowers, that's my assumption is that's sort of like almost like a print. I don't know what the term is, but like a print that goes directly onto the pottery after it's been fired, and then a clear glaze goes over it. And so, you know, if too much of the glaze is lost, then the part that makes this interesting has been lost. And of course, there's also this gold that looks like it's on the very top. So that would also be lost. So I think what I'm going to do is break this into pieces again, because I seem to love taking my hammer to things. And then change up what I'm using for when I'm tumbling it just a little bit, and to see how that affects this. So that's what I'm going to do. And so watch along and see what happens. Okay, so I have finished breaking it into pieces. Some of the pieces like that were from the bottom are like really, really thick, and I just couldn't get them. Actually, this is a better example of, like, the footer was on this thing, and it's really, really thick. I can't get it any shorter, I mean smaller, but I'll just see what happens. Some of them I was able to get some nice flowers still on it, and you know, I'll see if that stays once it's been tumbled. And other pieces, I think even if I can't get the glaze to stay that much, if it does make the side smoother, this you can kind of see the ridging on this, and so that should be nice. Give it some texture. And of course there's some gold. I don't know if that will stay on, probably not, but you know, I'll try. So now I'm going to set it up to tumble it. Okay, so as I've been breaking this apart, I've been putting the pieces into the tumbler drums. And actually, it looks like they're pretty much nice and full. So I don't think I need to add anything else. That is, in terms of needing to be tumbled. I'm going to, of course, add the pea gravel that I always use. Okay, so I've got pea gravel in there. And then I think what I'm going to do is, when I bought my tumbler, the rock tumbler, it came with like one bag of each stage of grit, which like I don't use. It also came with bags of this, which I believe it said these are walnut shells. They look like walnut shells. And importantly, they're not, I need scissors. Okay, so these are walnut shells, and importantly, they're not, I'm hoping, I'm going to put some of these in the hopes that this will also sort of like soften the edges of the pottery, but not because it's, walnut shells are softer than silicon carbide, which is what's used in the grit. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this to try to like kind of let it tumble more softly, or that's my hope. And actually, I'm going to weigh these two. And I'm going to go ahead and add the water. Okay, and so now I'm done, and I'm going to tumble it like that with only the walnut shells and the pea gravel. I'm not going to use any grit, and we'll see what happens after several days or a week. Okay, so I've had these ceramic, porcelain, I don't know, pottery pieces in the tumbler with only water, pea gravel, and some, I think, walnut shells that originally came with my rock tumbler. So the good news is that the glaze is very much intact in terms of the like the regular glaze, and then the roses are still very much visible. The bad news is that, first of all, the gold paint that was on the edges has been basically worn away. you can still kind of pick up the remnants of it right on this piece, but this piece, I mean, I can see where the gold used to be on the rim. So that's basically been worn off just by the action of against the probably the pebbles. The other really bad news is that it's still very sharp. All the edges. I think it has been worn down, maybe just a little bit, but not really that much. I mean, it's still like, in other words, I would not use this in a piece because any type of piece, unless it, I was going to be using mortar, because it's still, it could cut someone. I mean, this to me feels smoother. I mean, kind of smooth, but then over here it's harsh. I was checking it about every other day, hoping, but after a week, it's just, there's not enough progress on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these back in the rock tumbler with pea gravel, and I'm going to go ahead and use the stage 2 grit. No, sorry, stage 3 grit. Yeah, the stage 3 grit is what I used previously with pottery. And I'll probably start, I'm gonna see if I can get them out in sooner than a week, since they've already been tumbling for a week. In other words, because I don't want to lose the pretty flowers. So I'll be checking it probably about every other day and see how quickly I can get it out. And then I'll check back in. So I have tumbled the pieces with the stage 3 grit and then of course the normal pea gravel for about 4 days, I think. I was checking them like every day or every other day. Basically the first couple of days, you know, the part where the edges were just not smooth. They were still very much sharp, and you could, I mean, it just wasn't smoothed out. So I left them in there until checking, you know, to when the edges were smooth like I wanted. But unfortunately, while I was able to get the edges smoothed out, all the pretty roses and the flowers, and definitely all the gold paint has been completely removed by the grit. I was afraid that was going to happen, which is why initially I was tumbling it without the grit, but then without the grit, it just wasn't getting the edges smoothed out. And, you know, I don't know if maybe if I left them in there for like a month or something, if it would have done it just on its own. But yeah, so with the grit, it took off the roses. You know, the glaze is similar to when I did the other pottery. The glaze has been partially removed, definitely in the places where there's, you know, there was kind of a ridge work in the valleys. The glaze is still very much there, and I don't know, on the face of it, it kind of feels like the glaze is still there a little bit. Just almost when I'm looking at the color, like the color of the side is much wider. This is more yellow, which is the glaze was just like kind of this yellowish off-white. And also there's crazing, which seems to me like that's the glaze, that the grit was kind of working its way into the little crazes within the glaze. So yeah, so, and I mean, some of the pieces, like from the exterior where it had this kind of neat texture, I think it's even more obvious now after tumbling it. And so I do think that's a nice effect, but unfortunately, all the roses are gone. So, yeah, so that, I mean, it was an experiment. It didn't turn out the way I wanted, but did learn a bit. And now I have some, unfortunately, they're not all that interesting pieces of pottery, but, you know, I'll find something to do with them. So, yeah, so I guess I'll keep experimenting with things to see what I can get to stay on when it's tumbled and what will definitely come off and just can't get tumbled pieces with. So that's been this is my most recent video of me smashing things with a hammer and then putting them in a rock tumbler. So hope you enjoyed. And next time I decide to experiment with something else, I'll make another video. Okay, bye.